He left me with $600 in our account, 3 credit cards in my name, and a woman he swore he barely knew. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just watched. And in the silence, I built something he could never take from me again. It started with a single email, an automated alert from our joint account. At first, I thought it was nothing, maybe a subscription charge or a random ATM fee, but as I opened the bank app, something in my chest tightened. The number in the checking account was wrong, way off. Not a budgeting error, not a miscalculation, just wrong. I sat at the kitchen counter staring at it, the steam from my coffee curling upward like a slow question mark. We had over $17,000 in that account a few weeks ago. Now there was less than $600. My thumb hovered over the Transactions tab. I don't know why I hesitated. I already knew I was going to look. I already knew something was coming. And there it was. Hotel charges, flights, restaurant bills in cities he wasn't supposed to be in, a wire transfer I didn't authorize. One transaction was for $920 at a jewelry store in Phoenix. He had told me he was in Chicago on business. The room around me didn't blur, it just got quiet. Even my heartbeat seemed to back away, like it didn't want to be in the room with me. I sat still for a long time, not crying, not raging, just cataloging. The names on the charges, the dates, the cold fact of it. I should introduce myself. My name is Elena Martin. I'm 39 years old. I work in HR at a mid-sized software company, and until that moment, I believed I had a fairly ordinary marriage. Not perfect, but stable, mature. We'd been together for nearly 11 years. Now, I wasn't so sure I'd ever really known him at all. My husband wasn't just lying. He was gone. Maybe not physically, not yet. But the man I married had already left. What he left behind was debt, silence, and this surreal calm that made me feel like I was watching someone else's life happen. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew this wasn't going to be a scene out of a courtroom drama. There wouldn't be shouting, no revenge plans, no dramatic confrontations. There would be silence, there would be strategy, and there would be a new beginning. I met James at a leadership retreat in 2010. He was charming in the way older men sometimes are, confident, smooth, always a step ahead of the conversation. I was 24 then, working my first real job, and he was 32, already climbing the corporate ladder in finance. He wasn't flashy, just polished, a man who knew how to order wine, make eye contact, and hold a room. We dated for a year before he proposed. I didn't hesitate. He made me feel safe, like I'd found someone who would handle things, who could lead when I was tired of being strong. By the time I turned 30, we'd bought a house together in a quiet suburb. Life was neat, structured, predictable. I liked that. In the beginning, he was attentive, thoughtful, the kind of husband who put gas in my car and left notes in my lunch bag. We had Sunday rituals, pancakes, grocery runs, folding laundry while watching reruns of The West Wing. Looking back now, I can see how I mistook routine for intimacy. About 2 years ago, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on the collar, no perfume in the car. It was subtle. His phone was always face down. He started traveling more, sometimes back-to-back weeks, always citing urgent deals or client dinners. At first, I didn't question it. James had always been a workhorse, but something about the way he looked at me started to change. Or rather, stopped changing. We became polite. He stopped asking about my day. His texts grew shorter, more logistical. Don't wait up. Flight delayed. Call you tomorrow. One night, he came home late from what he said was a client meeting. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard him in the kitchen. He didn't come upstairs right away, just paced. I listened to the soft creak of floorboards, the clink of ice in a glass. When he finally joined me, he slipped into bed like a stranger trying not to wake someone else's wife. That was the first night I Googled emotional cheating. I started noticing other things too. Dry cleaning receipts for shirts I hadn't seen. a faint floral scent that didn't belong to our detergent. Once I saw a text flash across his phone before he could swipe it away. Just 2 words, "Miss you." He said it was from a colleague who was joking about a canceled meeting. I wanted to believe him, but there was this static, like a buzzing in the background of everything we did, and I felt myself pulling inward. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me. I became careful. I told myself it was just a phase, that couples went through rough patches. I told myself not to be paranoid. Then came the finance side. James had always handled our budget. It wasn't a control thing. At least I didn't think so at the time. He was just better at it, more organized. Every few weeks, he'd give me a general update. We're good. Put extra toward the mortgage this month. Moved some into savings. I never asked to see the numbers. I didn't need to. I trusted him. But a few months before I saw that bank alert, I started getting strange notices. Late fees for bills I thought were on autopay. A declined card at the grocery store. He said it was a bank error. I let it go. I told myself he was just under stress. I told myself if I asked too many questions, it would make things worse. I didn't want to be the nagging wife, the paranoid wife, the insecure wife. And yet, I began watching him more closely. He started taking his calls outside. He laughed more on the phone than he did with me. He began hiding receipts, closing tabs, locking drawers in his home office. Once, I reached for his laptop while mine was updating, and he snatched it back so fast I actually flinched. I didn't know who he was protecting, but it wasn't me. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear the truth, not because I couldn't handle it, but because once you ask a question, you can't unask it. And once someone answers, you can't go back to before. Instead, I buried myself in work. I started going to the gym again. I took long showers and longer drives. I sat in my parked car some evenings just to avoid walking into our house where the air felt like it belonged to someone else. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how deep it ran. The confirmation didn't come from a confession. It came from a carelessly synced iCloud account. I was home early on a Tuesday. I'd taken a sick day, not because I was ill, but because my body felt heavy, my thoughts slow, like I was moving through water. I hadn't been sleeping well. James was in Phoenix for what he said was a last-minute financial summit. I needed to print something for work and used our shared desktop in the office. I hadn't touched it in months. As I opened the browser, a message notification popped up in the corner of the screen. It wasn't mine. It was James's, and it was from her. Last night was perfect. I can't wait until it's always like this. I love you. I froze. Just stillness. The air around me disappeared. My hand hovered over the mouse. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just read it again. And then I clicked. The thread was long, weeks long, months maybe, hundreds of messages. I read through details I can't unknow. Flights he took that weren't business trips, restaurants he never mentioned. A beach photo he told me was from a client's retreat. It was actually from their weekend getaway. She called him baby. He called her my girl. They had pet names, shared playlists, private jokes. He had another life. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I just sat there, my hand still on the mouse, reading my own erasure. Every message from him to her was a small blade slicing away a version of my marriage I'd once believed in. I scrolled to the bottom and saw a photo. It was him, shirtless in our bedroom, the same blanket folded at the end of the bed, the same mirror in the background, the same room I was now standing in, but taken months ago while I had been visiting my mother in Texas. He brought her here, to our home. I closed the tab. I didn't need more. There was no confrontation to plan, no accusations to prepare. The evidence was thorough, cold, and complete. Still, I didn't text him. I didn't call. I didn't even cry. I just stood in the center of the office, quiet. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table. An hour passed before I moved again. Later that night, I went into our bedroom and opened the drawer on his side of the bed. Inside was a small box, a receipt from the jewelry store in Phoenix, the one that matched the bank charge I'd seen earlier. The necklace wasn't for me. There wasn't a card, but I didn't need one. The timing, the price, the hotel, it all lined up. And suddenly, a new feeling started to rise. Not rage, not grief, clarity. He wasn't just cheating, he was calculating, coordinated. This wasn't an accident or a single lapse in judgment. This was a second life, funded with shared money, cloaked in business travel and tax write-offs. I finally understood why our finances were in disarray, why I kept getting those late payment alerts, why the mortgage felt heavier each month. He had been funneling our stability into someone else's fantasy. That night, I took a notepad and started listing everything I needed to check: bank accounts, credit cards, retirement, property title. My name was on all of it, but so was his. I slept in the guest room. He didn't call, didn't check in. I think he assumed I was busy, or maybe he didn't care. Either way, I didn't care what he thought anymore. My job now was to protect what was left of my life before he could take more of it. When James returned 3 days later, he came through the door like nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek, set his suitcase down, asked what was for dinner. I watched him move through our kitchen, pouring wine, flipping on the stove, humming. It was surreal, like watching a performance. I didn't confront him that night. I observed. I listened to his small talk, his vague answers. I nodded when appropriate, smiled when expected. But inside, a quiet fire had been lit. He was acting, and I was finally ready to stop playing my part. Over the next week, I collected evidence. I downloaded statements, photocopied receipts, saved screenshots. I wasn't building a case to destroy him. I was building a record to protect myself. I spoke to a lawyer, quietly. I told her I wasn't sure what I wanted yet. She told me to act like I already knew. So I did. I began separating my accounts. I opened a P.O. box. I pulled my credit report. I started moving direct deposits into a new checking account under my name only, slowly, quietly, calmly. He didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care, but I did, and every silent step I took felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he hadn't quite erased. The breaking point didn't arrive with a fight. It arrived with an envelope, a thick, crinkled white envelope shoved into our mailbox, addressed to both of us. The return label said First National Collections Bureau. I opened it on instinct. Inside was a notice, a credit card in my name, maxed out, overdue, and sent to collections. I stared at it, numb. I'd never opened that account. I hadn't applied for anything new in over 5 years. But there it was, my name, my social security number, my financial ruin. The balance, $12,476, charges dating back a year. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled up the rest of our credit reports. I'd been checking only mine before, but now I looked into everything linked to us jointly and separately. I spent hours clicking through it all. James had opened 3 credit cards in my name. One of them had recurring payments to an airline rewards program. Another had charges for expensive hotels, luxury clothing, spa treatments. He didn't just lie. He didn't just cheat. He stole from me. I called the card company, shaking. I confirmed the transactions were unauthorized. They said I'd need to file a police report to pursue fraud. But since we were married and living together, they'd likely mark it as a domestic financial dispute. I thanked the woman on the phone and hung up. I knew what that meant. He had built a shadow economy under my name. If I walked away without untangling it, I'd carry his debt for years. I'd be financially ruined for choices I never made. And still, I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat at the kitchen table with my hand on that envelope. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. It felt like sitting inside the wreckage of a house I hadn't realized was burning. When James came home that night, I didn't say a word. I cooked dinner. We sat down together. He complimented the sauce. told me a boring story about his day. I nodded along, smiling in the right places, and I realized I was done pretending. This wasn't a marriage anymore. This was a trap, and I was done being polite inside of it. That night, after he fell asleep, I started my exit strategy. I packed a bag, not with clothes, but with essentials: my birth certificate, our marriage license, the house deed, financial statements, copies of everything. I stored the originals in a safety deposit box I opened the next morning before work. I told no one, not yet. I didn't want sympathy or opinions. I wanted leverage, stability, a foundation strong enough to hold me when I finally let myself fall apart. I found a small rental 2 towns over, furnished, no long-term lease, private. I paid the deposit and first month's rent from the savings account I had opened in secret. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The lawyer advised me to file first. In our state, the one who files holds more negotiating power, especially if fraud can be demonstrated. She told me to act fast. I did. I filed on a Friday. On Sunday morning, I sat James down at the kitchen table. He walked in barefoot, still in sweatpants, half asleep. I remember watching him pour his coffee, hum to himself. He looked like the same man I married. It was jarring. But then I reminded myself, that man had never existed. Not really. I know about her, I said calmly, and I know about the accounts, the cards in my name, the debt. He blinked. The coffee mug froze in midair. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to say something clever, but I didn't give him the chance. I filed for divorce. Papers are being served tomorrow. He sat down slowly. Elena, listen. No, I said. You listen. This isn't a discussion. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I've frozen the joint accounts. I've moved my paycheck. I've made copies of everything. I watched his face shift, confusion, then panic, then anger. He raised his voice, started blaming stress, started blaming me. I didn't flinch. You lied. You cheated. And you stole from me, I said. You don't get to rewrite that. He stood up, tried to pace, tried to spin it. I made mistakes, he said, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I shook my head. You didn't make a mistake. You made a system. I left that afternoon. I drove straight to my new apartment. When I opened the door, it smelled like fresh paint and pine sol. The furniture was simple, but clean. I set my bag down and just stood in the quiet for a long time. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt safe. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was finally out of his reach. People asked if I wanted to destroy him, if I wanted to go scorched earth, take him for everything he had. But the truth? I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance, peace, an ending with dignity. Something I could live with. It wasn't about letting him off easy. It was about letting myself go. I didn't scream at him. I didn't drag him through public humiliation. I didn't post screenshots or rant online. That would have been noise, temporary power. But I wanted silence, permanent power. So I made a choice to fight quietly, methodically, with grace. In mediation, James tried to play the regretful husband. He brought flowers, wore soft sweaters, spoke in low tones, as if we were just working through a rough patch. But his eyes were calculating. He thought I'd cave, thought I'd miss the life we built. What he didn't realize was that I no longer saw that life as something real. He burned it down. I wasn't grieving the marriage. I was grieving the years I spent believing in it. Our lawyer sessions were tedious. He tried to negotiate spousal support. He tried to push some of the credit card debt onto me, said it was shared lifestyle spending. But I had my records, screenshots, timeline breakdowns, everything labeled and backed up. The mediator, a stern woman named Carol, saw right through him. At one point, she slid a printout across the table, his signature on a new credit card application in my name. His face drained. That was the moment I stopped feeling afraid of him. I started building a wall between our names. I requested all accounts be separated by court order. I froze my credit. I filed affidavits. I met with a financial counselor and mapped out a repayment strategy, just in case the court didn't wipe the fraudulent debt clean. I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I was rebuilding brick by brick. And he watched me become someone he didn't recognize, watched the silence work harder than any threat could. He sent me texts in the weeks that followed, some angry, some desperate, some nostalgic. I didn't answer. I didn't block him either. That would have given him clarity. I wanted him to sit in uncertainty, the same way I did for months, wondering, guessing, unraveling. My parents offered to come visit. My best friend asked if she could slash his tires spiritually. We joked, but even in those moments, I felt myself shifting. I didn't want him hurt. I wanted him forgotten. I changed my routines, my grocery store, my gym, my route to work. I got a new phone number. I painted my nails dark blue, something I hadn't done in years. I stopped explaining my choices to anyone. I wasn't angry anymore. I was becoming untouchable. One night, about a month after I left, I walked past a restaurant we used to go to on anniversaries. I paused outside for a second. The lights were warm, the chatter inside cheerful, and for the first time, I realized I didn't feel a pang. No longing, no nostalgia, just a quiet thank you to the version of me who once thought that was happiness, and to the version of me who walked away when she realized it wasn't. My apartment was small, but it became a sanctuary. Mornings were my favorite. Sunlight poured through the windows and landed on the chipped kitchen tiles like gold. I bought a secondhand French press, started making real coffee instead of reheating his leftovers. I played jazz while I got ready for work. Some mornings, I just sat on the couch in silence, holding my cup, not thinking about anything at all. That was the victory, the absence of worry. I started therapy, not to cry about him, but to understand why I stayed so long, why I ignored the signs, why I called my own instincts insecurity. My therapist never judged me. She just asked good questions. Slowly, I started answering them. I made a no contact rule for myself. No texting him, no checking his social media, no updates from mutual friends. He could do whatever he wanted. It was no longer my story to monitor. Instead, I got busy rewriting mine. I joined a book club, started volunteering one Saturday a month, took a short online course in interior design, something I'd always loved but never pursued. I even got a promotion at work. My boss said I'd seemed clearer. I smiled and said, "That's exactly how I feel." The divorce finalized 6 months later. No dramatic courtroom scene, just a final signature, a quiet exit. He didn't fight. He didn't show up, actually, signed his part remotely. I remember stepping outside the courthouse, holding the final documents in my bag. The sky was clear. I exhaled in a way I didn't know I'd been holding my breath for years. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just light. I didn't get revenge. I didn't slash his tires. I didn't post a tell-all thread. I didn't make him suffer. I let him go. Because the real victory wasn't destroying him. It was reclaiming myself. And now when people ask what happened, I just say, he cheated, he lied, and he left me broke. Then I smile. But I didn't get revenge. I got free. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where silence spoke louder than confrontation, where walking away wasn't weakness, but wisdom, tell me your story in the comments. Not for sympathy, but for solidarity. And if this video made you feel seen, even just a little, hit the like button, subscribe for more true stories, and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. You don't need revenge to win. You just need to get free.